Let me tell you about the day everything changed for the Galactic Council of Advanced Species. I'm Drex Vognar, Senior Administrative Assistant to the Undersecretary of Primitive Species Observation. Not exactly the most glamorous position in the galaxy, but it gives me a front-row seat to the universe's greatest comedy show. For 12,000 cycles, the Council has maintained perfect order across 17 galactic arms. Our members represent the pinnacle of evolution, the Zentari with their hive-mind quantum computing brains, the ethereal Luminae who transcended physical form, the Morcalian techno-organics who merged with their machines. Real advanced stuff, you know? The kind of species who solve faster than light travel as a leisure activity. We discovered new species regularly, guided them toward galactic citizenship, and maintained the sacred order of progress. The Council's mission was simple: find, evaluate, assimilate, and regularize. Our protocols were foolproof until we met the humans. Oh, the humans. Those bizarre bipeds from that unremarkable blue-green planet in an utterly forgettable solar system. Third rock from a mediocre star. Nothing special. Or so we thought. I still remember Administrator Klovax's dismissive tentacle wave when the preliminary report came in. Another carbon-based species with opposing digits and limited telepathic ability? File them under Standard Development Track C12 and check back in 1,000 years. That should have been that. Instead, I'm recording this unofficial history, because someone needs to document how spectacularly wrong we were. The Council prides itself on certainty. We've categorized and predicted the development of over 10,000 species with 99.97% accuracy. We know which civilizations will destroy themselves through nuclear war, depressingly common, which will achieve immortality through genetic engineering, rarer than you'd hope, and which will eventually become council members, an exclusive club. Humanity wasn't supposed to matter. They weren't supposed to change anything. They certainly weren't supposed to make the decision that would fundamentally alter galactic politics forever. But they did, and none of us saw it coming. As Grand Counselor Thrix Belthar loves to pontificate at every assembly, the advancement of a species can be measured by its ability to overcome its biological limitations through technology and thought. The Council sits around congratulating themselves on transcending their evolutionary origins while maintaining that smug superiority only immortal beings can truly perfect. Little did they know that one seemingly insignificant decision made by humans would eventually make them look like primitive fools. And I, a mid-level bureaucrat who once accidentally used the Grand Counselor's sacred meditation pool as a foot bath, would be the one to connect the dots. So grab whatever passes for refreshment in your species and settle in. This is the story of how humanity broke the galaxy and why we probably deserved it. The official discovery of Earth occurred during a routine survey of Sector 8472 by the exploration vessel Luminous Certainty. Captain Mox Quillian Adorcian, with an unfortunate penchant for collecting alien headwear, initially classified Earth as yet another unremarkable Class M planet with noisy inhabitants. The first detailed observation report described humans as bipedal mammals with concerning territorial tendencies and an inexplicable attachment to furry quadrupeds that serve no apparent purpose. Captain Quillian recommended minimal contact and standard observation protocols, but when the report reached the Council, it caused the usual flurry of bureaucratic activity. Forms were filed in triplicate, committees were formed, and important-looking officials nodded gravely while understanding absolutely nothing. Standard procedure, in other words. The evaluation committee assigned to Earth consisted of 4 members: Zendraval, a Luminae energy being who considered physical form to be embarrassingly primitive; Grox Thalmar, a Zentari hive-mind fragment notorious for his impatience with single-brain species; Director Plex, a Morcalian whose cybernetic enhancements were so extensive that he routinely picked up local radio transmissions through his head antenna; and finally Representative Klee, a Volgorian diplomat whose species evolved from something resembling Earth Octopi, and who therefore found humans disturbingly rigid and pointy. I was assigned as administrative support, which meant I got to take notes while they said monumentally stupid things about humans. They still use combustion engines? Grox sneered during our first briefing. How charmingly primitive. My species outgrew explosions as transportation around the time we developed agriculture. Their communication relies primarily on vibrating air molecules, Zendra observed with the subtle condescension that only a being of pure energy can master. How do they transmit complex ideas without at least basic telepathy? Director Plex was particularly disturbed by humanity's relationship with technology. They create separate machines for each function rather than integrating technology with their biology. Inefficient, wasteful, typical of early-stage development. Only Representative Klee showed any interest. They appear quite adaptable, though. Look at the variety of environments they inhabit on their single planet. Adaptability without direction is merely chaos, Grox dismissed. Their societal structures are fragmented. No unified purpose. No collective consciousness. They'll likely destroy themselves within a century. The committee's initial classification placed humans in development category D15, species of limited potential requiring minimal observation and no intervention. The projected timeline suggested humans would either achieve basic interplanetary travel within 500 years or destroy themselves through environmental collapse or nuclear weapons. Either way, not the Council's problem. What nobody noticed, what I only spotted by accident while organizing the observation data, was a peculiar human habit. A decision they'd made so long ago it was embedded in their culture. At the time, I simply flagged it as cultural curiosity and moved on. How was I to know this seemingly inconsequential trait would eventually flip the galactic order on its pretentious head? The committee filed its report, recommended standard non-interference protocols, and moved on to what they considered more pressing matters. Earth was relegated to routine monitoring status, with check-ins scheduled every 50 years. If only they'd paid more attention. If only they'd looked more closely at the data. But the Council was too busy being advanced to notice the seeds of their own humbling. For the next 100 years, humanity remained blissfully unaware of galactic scrutiny, while the Council remained arrogantly dismissive of human potential. The official observation post, disguised as an orbital debris piece, transmitted regular updates that were promptly filed and ignored. Then came the first anomaly. Humans reached their moon centuries ahead of schedule. Statistical aberration, Grox declared when the report crossed his desk. A momentary acceleration in an otherwise standard development curve. They'll regress to predicted parameters. They didn't. Humans launched space stations, sent probes throughout their solar system, and developed computer technology at a rate that caused the predictive algorithms division to run diagnostics 3 times, assuming their systems had malfunctioned. The Council, in its infinite wisdom, decided it was time for subtle intervention. Standard procedure for potentially disruptive species involved introducing minor technological setbacks, nothing dramatic, just enough to slow their progress to manageable levels. The intervention team deployed a series of carefully calculated obstacles, induced material failures in critical aerospace components, the subtle electromagnetic interference with their global communication networks, and targeted power fluctuations in research facilities. The kind of problems that would appear as technical difficulties rather than sabotage. It didn't work. They've turned our interference into innovation opportunities, reported a baffled field agent. The material failures led them to develop new alloys. The communication disruptions sparked advances in signal processing. They're actually accelerating because of our interventions. Director Plex was particularly disturbed. Their technological development lacks proper sequence. They're making intuitive leaps without the foundational understanding our models require. It's unsettling. Zendra, whose energy form was incapable of expressing concern through facial features, but who nevertheless managed to convey alarm through luminosity fluctuations, suggested more direct measures. Perhaps we should consider a cultural intervention. Subtle psychosocial nudges toward more internal conflict to divert their resources. That plan backfired spectacularly when humans responded to increased tensions by developing even more innovative technologies and cooperative structures. Meanwhile, I continued to notice odd patterns in the human data, their peculiar approach to problem solving, their seemingly contradictory behaviors, their bizarre relationship with their own limitations. All stemming from that one fundamental decision they'd made millennia ago, so deeply embedded in their psychology that they themselves didn't recognize it as a choice. The diplomatic corps, finally recommended first contact, reasoning that direct interaction would allow for more effective management of human development. The council approved with the usual pageantry and ceremony that accompanies their rare unanimous decisions. The chosen emissary was grandiose Ambassador Thlex, a Joxian known for his ability to impress primitive species with his multidimensional appendages and bioluminescent communication displays. He was dispatched with a standard diplomatic package, technology offerings just advanced enough to awe, but not enough to significantly advance the recipient species, and cultural exchange protocols designed to establish council superiority without being overtly condescending, and the obligatory invitation to begin the 10,000-year path toward potential council consideration. Flex returned 3 weeks later, his bioluminescence dimmed to embarrassed pastels, requesting immediate reassignment to a distant galaxy. "They ask questions," he reported, his voice modulation revealing deep distress. "So many questions. Not about our technology or our knowledge, but about our assumptions. When I explained our 10,000-year development program, they suggested efficiency improvements that would reduce it to 1,000 years. When I described the Council's achievements over millions of years, they asked why it had taken us so long. The Council was not pleased. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. Primitive species were meant to be awed, not inquisitive. While the Council debated increasingly desperate measures to contain human development, humanity casually solved faster than light travel using principles the Council had never considered, but rendered their planet's climate disaster moot through innovative atmospheric engineering, and began establishing colonies throughout their solar system. All while that one critical decision still unnoticed by the Council continued shaping their development in ways our models couldn't predict. The crisis began, as these things often do, with something seemingly insignificant. A spatial anomaly appeared at the edge of Council space, a tear in the fabric of reality that defied all known physical laws. Small at first, but growing exponentially, threatening to engulf entire star systems. The Council's response was immediate and predictably ineffective. The Science Division deployed their most advanced reality-stabilizing technology, which was promptly consumed by the anomaly. The Zentari attempted to use their collective consciousness to comprehend and neutralize the phenomenon, only to retreat with what I can only describe as a collective headache. The Luminae tried to convert the anomaly's energy into harmless radiation and instead caused it to triple in size. After 2 months of failed attempts, the Council was forced to admit they faced an extinction-level event beyond their understanding. In a historic emergency session, Grand Councilor Drex Vognar made an unprecedented proposal, perhaps. He suggested, his voice modulator tuned to convey appropriate gravitas, we should consult the humans. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members flickered, shifted, vibrated, and emitted various gases that their universal translators politely rendered as expressions of outrage and incredulity. The humans? Director Plex's antenna literally bent with indignation. They've barely mastered interstellar travel. Their civilization is less than 10,000 years old. What could they possibly offer that the combined wisdom of the Council cannot? Nevertheless, desperation prevailed over pride. A delegation was dispatched to Earth to formally request human assistance. I was included in this delegation, ostensibly to handle administrative details, but really because nobody of higher rank wanted to suffer the indignity of asking primitives for help. The humans' response was not what we expected. Cool, a space mystery. Let's check it out, said Dr. Jackson Quinn, a quantum physicist wearing what appeared to be sleeping attire during our formal diplomatic video conference. We'll need some equipment, a team of about 20 specialists, and can we bring snacks? The human approach to the anomaly was nothing short of heretical by Council standards. While our finest minds had developed complex theoretical models and attempted precise technological solutions, the humans experimented. They poked the anomaly with various instruments, sent in probes that should have been instantly destroyed, and at one point, threw an actual physical object into it just to see what happens. Are they insane? Whispered Zendra, her energy form dimming with horror as we observed from what our scientists had calculated was a safe distance. No, I replied, finally understanding what I'd been seeing in the data all along. They're curious. That was the moment when everything clicked into place. The human decision that had shaped their entire development, the choice our models had failed to account for, was simply this. Humans had decided that not knowing was more intriguing than knowing. They had chosen curiosity over certainty. While the council species had evolved toward increasing certitude, developing technology to eliminate unknowns, social structures to enforce consistent outcomes, thought patterns that favored predictability, humans had gone in the opposite direction. They embraced uncertainty. They actually enjoyed not knowing things, because it gave them something to discover. As I watched Dr. Quinn floating outside the research vessel, deliberately getting closer to the anomaly than safety protocols allowed, I saw the embodiment of that decision. If we increase the quantum resonance field, while simultaneously introducing a modified tachyon burst, he was saying into his communicator, we might be able to, oops, that's unexpected. The unexpected was that the anomaly suddenly shifted color and began contracting rather than expanding. What did you do? Demanded the Zentari scientist monitoring the situation. Not entirely sure, Dr. Quinn admitted cheerfully. But I think we can replicate it on a larger scale. We just need to remove all the safety limiters on your quantum stabilizers and reconfigure them to amplify distortions rather than minimize them. That's exactly the opposite of their design purpose, protested the Zentari. Exactly. Dr. Quinn beamed. Sometimes you have to make things worse before they get better. Trust me. This is going to work. Against all logic, all protocol, and all safety standards, the Council authorized the human solution. 3 days later, the anomaly collapsed in on itself and disappeared, leaving behind only trace radiation and a lot of confused Council scientists. When asked to explain their solution for the official record, Dr. Quinn shrugged. We noticed that fighting against the anomaly's natural tendencies just made it stronger. So instead, we gave it what it wanted, more instability, but in a controlled way that caused it to essentially overload and collapse. It's like, have you ever had a case of hiccups? We hadn't, of course. Advanced species had eliminated such biological inconveniences eons ago. Well, he continued, undeterred by our blank stares, sometimes the cure for hiccups is to hiccup even harder until your body resets. Same principle. The Council was saved, the crisis averted, and the uncomfortable truth revealed. But the most advanced species in the galaxy had been outperformed by comparative newcomers because of a fundamental decision made so long ago that no one recognized it as a choice anymore. We had chosen certainty. Humans had chosen curiosity. And in a universe full of unknowns, their choice turned out to be the better one. The Council chambers had never witnessed such upheaval. Emergency sessions ran continuously for weeks. Formal protocols were abandoned as species representatives argued, bargained, and occasionally emitted distress particles that required specialized cleaning crews. The implications were staggering. If humans could solve a problem that stumped the collective intelligence of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, what did that mean for the established order? Worse, what did it mean for the Council's carefully curated image of superiority? The Zentari delegation was particularly disturbed. Their thought processes are dangerously erratic, Grox insisted during one heated debate. They treat the fundamental laws of physics as suggestions. They must be contained before they destabilize countless delicate systems with their chaotic approach. Contained? Representative Klee's tentacles rippled with disagreement. They just saved us from extinction. Perhaps we should be asking them for guidance instead. The political fallout was immediate and far-reaching. The Council's 12,000-year hierarchy began to fracture along new lines, those who feared human unpredictability and those who were intrigued by it. Meanwhile, humans remained blissfully unaware of the galactic turmoil they'd caused. Having solved what they considered a neat space puzzle, they returned to their relatively tiny corner of the galaxy and continued their haphazard expansion and development. But the Council couldn't ignore them anymore. Human ambassadors were hastily invited to previously restricted diplomatic functions. Human scientists received urgent requests to review stubborn technological problems. Human cultural artifacts, everything from their movies to their bizarre comfort foods, became sought after contraband in Council space. Director Plex established an entire division dedicated to understanding the human approach, a phrase that quickly became shorthand for unconventional thinking. We must integrate their methodologies without succumbing to their chaos, he declared, while simultaneously installing what humans called a magic 8-ball on his desk for anticipatory probability consultation. The Luminae, beings of pure energy who had long considered physical form a primitive limitation, began experimenting with temporary materialization after learning that humans valued sensory experience as a source of insight. The resulting sensation tourism created an entirely new industry overnight. Even the Zentari, after initial resistance, began incorporating randomized thought processes into their hive-minded practice they termed controlled chaos integration, but which humans would simply call brainstorming. I watched all this from my newly promoted position as Deputy Director of Human Relations, a department that hadn't existed before the anomaly crisis. My once overlooked observations about human psychology were now required reading for council diplomats, and I found myself explaining the concept of thinking outside the box to beings who had spent millennia perfecting the metaphorical box. The humans, for their part, took their new galactic prominence in stride. When formally offered an accelerated path to council membership, reducing the usual 10,000-year waiting period to a mere 1,000 years, the human delegation politely declined. "Thanks, but we're not really joiners," explained Ambassador Elena Rodriguez. "We're happy to collaborate on specific projects, exchange knowledge, and maintain friendly relations, but we prefer to chart our own course." The council was stunned. No species had ever declined council membership. It wasn't done. It wasn't even conceptually possible within their framework of understanding. "Perhaps they misunderstood the honor being offered," suggested Zendra. "The translation matrix may have failed to convey the prestige of council association." "No," I said, now confident in my understanding of human psychology. "They understood perfectly. They just value independence more than prestige." More shocking revelations followed. Humans had no unified planetary government, a condition the Council had always considered a prerequisite for interstellar capability. They maintained multiple competing economic systems simultaneously. They deliberately preserved contradictory cultural practices. They actually celebrated ideological diversity rather than seeking consensus. By all established council metrics, humans should have self-destructed centuries ago. Instead, they were thriving, expanding, and now inadvertently revolutionizing galactic politics. As council species scrambled to adapt to this new paradigm, I found myself in the unexpected position of being considered an expert on humanity despite being as blindsided by their capabilities as everyone else. The difference was that I had recognized the pattern earlier and was slightly less resistant to its implications. "What do you think they'll do next?" Grand Councillor Drex Vognar asked me during a private consultation, his usual pomposity deflated by recent events. "I have absolutely no idea," I replied honestly. For the first time in council history, that was exactly the right answer. 5 years have passed since the anomaly crisis. The galaxy has changed more in that time than in the previous millennium. The council still exists, but its structure and function have been fundamentally altered. The certainty protocols, the backbone of council governance for thousands of years, have been replaced by what humans call adaptive management. Decision matrices that once required centuries of deliberation now incorporate elements of intuition and experimental thinking. The once sacrosanct prediction engines sit unused, but their perfectly rational outputs deemed too limiting for a universe that refuses to behave according to even the most advanced models. I've spent these years studying humans more closely, trying to understand how a species so young, so chaotic, and so contradictory could upend the established order so completely. The answer, I believe, lies in that one critical decision they made so long ago that they no longer recognize it as a choice, but the decision to embrace uncertainty as a virtue rather than a flaw. While council species evolved toward perfect knowledge and certainty, humans evolved to thrive in uncertainty. They don't just tolerate the unknown, they're drawn to it. They don't just accept change, they deliberately create it. What we saw as dangerous unpredictability, they experience as exhilarating possibility. The Zentari have a saying, "To know all paths is to master the journey." Humans would counter, "The fun is in not knowing where you'll end up." This fundamental difference in perspective explains why humans approach the anomaly with experimental playfulness, while council scientists approached it with rigorous methodology. It explains why humans create thousands of different music styles instead of perfecting one optimal form. It explains their bewildering array of governments, religions, philosophies, and social structures. Humans never decided which way was best, they decided to try everything. Council species had spent eons eliminating uncertainty from their existence. They engineered perfect prediction models, created stable social structures, and developed technologies that operated with flawless consistency. They achieved what they believed was the pinnacle of advancement, a universe without surprises. And then they encountered a species that deliberately seeks out surprises, that intentionally creates uncertainty when things become too predictable, or that actually becomes bored with perfection. How will this affect long-term galactic development? Grand Councilor Drex Vognar asked during the most recent assembly, his voice modulator failing to hide his anxiety. Representative Klee, who has become something of a human enthusiast, rippled her tentacles in what she's learned is a human gesture of uncertainty. Who knows? Isn't that exciting? Half the council chamber erupted in approving light pulses, the other half nearly short-circuited with horror. As for me, I've requested reassignment to Earth. After thousands of years in the perfect predictability of council service, I find myself drawn to the chaotic creativity of human civilization. I want to experience firsthand what it means to live with uncertainty, not as a problem to be solved, but as an opportunity to be embraced. The final irony is not lost on me. The council spent millennia believing they were guiding lesser species toward enlightenment. Only to discover that perhaps they were the ones who had taken a wrong turn somewhere in their evolutionary journey. By choosing certainty over curiosity, they achieved perfection at the cost of possibility. Humans, with their messy, contradictory, unpredictable ways, reminded the galaxy of something it had forgotten, that not knowing what comes next isn't something to fear, it's what makes the journey worth taking. In the end, the one decision that reshaped galactic empires wasn't about technology or politics or military strength. It was about having the courage to say, "I don't know, let's find out." And if that's not advanced, I don't know what is. Drex Vognar, former senior administrative assistant, current enthusiastic embracer of uncertainty.